So we began this series of lessons on the prequel, learning about this God who created all of these things, Genesis chapter 1. Then we hear the scripture reading this morning. What is man that you are mindful of it? Why would God care about us? And yet He does. And He wants this relationship with human beings. And we read on in Genesis how He picked out this one man, Abraham. And He said, I'm going to bless everyone through you. Well, his descendants became slaves in Egypt, but then God rescued that family and then gave them a land and houses they did not build and vineyards that they did not plant. And He was patient with them as they got themselves into one mess after another. And then they asked for a king, even though they had a king in the Creator of the universe, but He allowed them to have a king. And when that king failed, then He picked out another one, young David. The Bible tells us that David was a king after God's own heart. He was chosen when he was only young. Remember, Samuel goes to the house and he has Jesse bring out all his boys from the biggest to the smallest, and each one God is saying, no, no, no. And then Samuel says, well, is there anyone else? Well, there's the youngest out back with the sheep. Bring him in. And he, of course, was the one. And so Samuel anoints him to be king, but really nothing much came from it at the time. Saul still was king. And during that time, then, David goes and plays the lyre for Saul so that Saul could be soothed as this evil spirit comes upon him. Then you know the story, of course, with David, with Goliath and killing Goliath. And then David becomes the commander of Saul's forces. And then David becomes persona non grata with Saul and has to run for his life. But then Saul is killed in battle. And God tells David to move his family and all of his men from Ziklag, where they've been living in Philistine territory, to Hebron, which is the largest city in the tribe of Judah. Now, it helps us to understand a little bit of the political situation that is going on here. Eventually, there is going to be a civil war in Israel. So you're going to get, and you see in this map, you're going to get the north, Israel, and the south, Judah. Now, all of it's called Israel at this point in the story. But when they have this division, the northern tribes are going to be known as Israel, and then the southern tribes, which is mostly Judah, are going to be known as Judah. So David has moved to Hebron, but eventually, again, there's going to be this civil war. But long before there is this division, is a civil war, there's actually sort of a division already within the tribes. You've already read, if you've been paying attention, in 1 Samuel, they'll talk about all of Israel and Judah. So there's already some kind of an internal division that's taking place, even while Saul was king. Well, you remember Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, which is right about here, kind of right in the middle of all of this. And his supporters are all up in the north. David, meanwhile, is from Judah in the south. And so his supporters are all in the south. So he moves his family and everybody to Hebron, which is in Judah, this big town in Judah in the south, and all of his supporters are there. Saul has died, so in the north, Abner, the general, takes one of Saul's sons, Ishbaal, and promotes him to the king, but he really is just a puppet king for Abner. And so we have this division, and it looks like, as David's going to begin his reign as king over Israel, it's already going to be a divided kingdom. But then a series of events unfolds. Abner gets crossways with Ishbaal, or Ishbaal gets crossways with Abner. And so Abner defects and goes to the south to side with David down in Judah. And then two men come, and inexplicably, they decide they're going to assassinate Ishbaal, and they come down to David to brag about it, which was really a big mistake because David kills them on the spot. But all of a sudden, David has no rival in the north. And then we read this, 2 Samuel. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on the military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. And so now David's been anointed king 3 different times. First of all, by Samuel when he was a young man, and then when he comes to Hebron, the elders of Judah anoint him to be king. And now that they bring this kingdom together and the people from the north have come down, the elders of Israel of the north have come down, anointed him to be king. And then David does something very strategic. He moves his kingdom from Hebron. He moves his headquarters, his family, from Hebron to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, which is in the tribe of Benjamin, right between the north and the south, where Saul was from, Benjamin. And this helps to unite the kingdom together in Jerusalem. Now, of course, not all of it is strategy. We're told over and over again that God is looking out for David, that God is taking care of David. Last week we noticed all the near misses. Saul's just about to get David and kill him, and then something happens. Saul gets called away. Or Saul's on one side of a mountain and David's on another side, and Saul's just about to get him, and then he doesn't. Near miss after near miss. Something always happens. That something, of course, is God. God intervening in David's life. And so now all these events have taken place and have fallen into place for him to be the king over a united kingdom. All because really David has this great relationship with God. He's constantly consulting God about things before doing something big. And God is giving David instructions. Go here, do this. So there's this close relationship between the creator of the universe and this guy who's sort of sitting on the throne in his place. This close relationship between somebody who is so far above and somebody who is so far below. What is man that you are mindful of? God, this creator, and David. But sometimes when there is a great relationship between somebody who is above and somebody who is a subordinate, sometimes that relationship quits being this and starts being this. And then things sort of get sideways. In the military, they have strict rules, strict laws against fraternization between officers and enlisted. And the reason for that is, if you have a great relationship of friendship between an officer and an enlisted person, well, before long, this enlisted person is wanting special favors from the officer. And then before long, he's treating the officer like they're buddies. And then before long, he's not doing what the officer tells him he has to do. And if this spreads in the military, you're going to lose all authority and all control. So you can't cross those lines. But David crossed the line. To consolidate his kingdom there and the headquarters in Jerusalem, he decided he wanted to move the Ark of the Covenant from where it was to Jerusalem. You might remember the Ark of the Covenant is this box that God had them made when they were wandering in the wilderness. Inside of it are the 10 Commandments, some of the manna that they got in the wilderness, and Aaron's staff that budded out when they were out there. So these things are all inside the Ark of the Covenant. And we don't know exactly what it looked like, but people think it looks something like this. Now notice on top of it, these beings, the bird-looking beings, these are considered to be cherubim, which are supposed to be these powerful, incredibly powerful, angelic figures who were fierce. Sort of like Secret Service agents for God. You know, they're around God all the time. So here's a replica of them. And you notice these loops with these poles in it. That's going to come into play in just a moment. But then you notice that there's no image on top of the ark for God because, well, they're not supposed to make images of God. And so there's this empty spot up there for God. So David wants to move the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. Think back, before even Saul was king, the Ark of the Covenant got taken out to battle against the Philistines. You remember that? and they lost the battle, and the Philistines took it, which was a big mistake, because the next thing you know, they have tumors growing all of them and rats everywhere. Rats. Who loves rats, right? And so they've got to send this thing back to them. So they put the ark on the back of a cart and have some cows pull it, and they take it back, and the cows walk over to Beth Shemesh. And for some crazy reason, the people of Beth Shemesh decided they would just look inside that thing. And their faces just melted off of them. Well, that was Indiana Jones. But they died on the spot. And this frightened everyone so much that they said, we can't have this thing around. So they put it in the house of a guy named Abinadab. And it stayed there for 20 years in Abinadab's house. God meant business when it came to the ark. First of all, only the priests were supposed to carry it from the tribe of Levi, and a specific group called the Kohathites were supposed to carry it. You read about this in the book of Numbers. After Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, only then are the Kohathites to come and do the carrying, but they must not touch the holy things or they will die. They must not touch the holy things or they will die. So looking inside the ark is probably not a good idea, right? So God takes this very seriously. Normally the ark's kept inside the tabernacle, or later when they have a temple, because the tabernacle and the temple are supposed to be the place in which heaven and earth meet. And this is where God's throne is, inside of the most holy place, inside the tabernacle or in the temple. In fact, you'll read several times, you might have noticed this, it talks about God who is enthroned between the cherubim, these creatures that are on the top of the ark. And you notice that the top of it's called the mercy seat, supposedly where God sits as great judge and king. And when they moved it, then the Levites, specifically the Kohathites, were supposed to carry it. This is the loop and the poles that we saw on the side of this thing. You're supposed to carry it like you would carry a king. You might get an image like this. This is how you transport a king in the ancient world. So this is what the Ark of the Covenant is supposed to represent when they carry the ark. Because it doesn't matter if you have Saul as king. It doesn't matter if you have David as king or any of the other kings that are going to follow. Everyone is supposed to know that the real king is on the ark. God is their king. And so David decides to bring this ark to Jerusalem. And we read this in 2 Samuel. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. So you're moving the king to Jerusalem. And you decide to load him in the back of the U-Haul trailer, which is what essentially has happened. They put God, rather than carrying him as if he is a king, they put him on the back of a cart as if he is so much luggage to be carried around. How do you think David would have felt if when he moved from Hebron to Jerusalem, they had loaded him in the back of the U-Haul, if they had put him on the back of a cart? And yet this is how they are treating the Creator of the universe. At some point for David and for all those around him, God has ceased being up here and has dropped down here. God was here, David's here, but somehow the shift has started happening like this in their relationship. And so the throne of God is in need of no need of transportation as if it is the throne of God. We can put it on a cart like so much cargo, like the Philistines did when they sent it back. God is not really holy, so if the ark starts to teeter, the cart starts to teeter, and the ark starts to fall, you can just reach out and touch it to hold it up. But then Uzzah is struck dead, and everybody is reminded who and what they're dealing with here. This is the one enthroned between the cherubim. This is the one who created all the stars, all the heavens, the moon, the sun. This is the one who did it all simply by speaking. What is man that you were mindful of him, the psalm says? The Son of Man that you care for him. We are but tiny, tiny, tiny specks. And yet a tiny speck decided to load the King of the universe in the back of a U-Haul. Two things are said about God in Scripture that are a little bit sort of in tension with one another. On one hand, you have this sense of God is loving, and God is merciful, and God is gracious. But on the other side, you've got God is holy, and God is awesome. God is fearful. Some of us have kind of gotten the extreme of some of this side in preaching from time to time, so that you get the sense that God is not only holy and awesome and powerful and fearful, but He is out to get you. And He's just waiting for you to slip up one time. What's left out there is this sense of mercy and grace and love, the sense of we are called to love God with our heart and soul and mind and strength. And so we come back over possibly to the other extreme over here. God wants us to love Him. God is love. God is mercy. God is grace. But if we go too far to this extreme, now this relationship has gone from here to here. And now God's sort of like our buddy. One we can transport on a cart. So it's Sunday and we've come to worship and maybe we're fashionably late. And while one of the songs is going on or a prayer, you pull out your phone and look at it and you lean over to somebody next to you to show them something really funny. It's this. OMG, or it's this, OMG, but then somebody finally just spells it out. Oh my God. In contrast to Jews who will not even say the name of God, we flippantly throw God's name around. How did we get to such a point that we would do such a thing? And then use His name in a curse. How would you feel about somebody doing like that? You smash your thumb with a hammer and you say, Tom! Or you curse somebody by the name of Mary or Susie or Joe. How did we get to a point where we would see God in this relationship more like this now? That we could so abuse His name. How would you feel if somebody would not take you seriously in your life? How do you feel if people will not listen to you? Or when they do listen to you, they only laugh in response? Parents, how would you feel if your children started treating you as a buddy instead of the parent? Teachers, how would you feel if your students started treating you as a buddy instead of the teacher? Who is it we have come to worship this morning? Is it the one who made the sun and the moon and the stars? Is it the one who causes these orbits to all take place in perfect synchronization? Is it the one who has created these plants to give us oxygen? Is it the one who gives us the clouds that brings the rain? Or is it just somebody we read about in a book? When Uzzah was struck, everyone was reminded who it was they came to worship. They were carrying a nuclear bomb on the back of that cart, but they sort of acted like it's a firecracker. And David knows. He knows. After this incident with Uzzah being struck dead, they take the ark and they put it in the house of a guy named Obed-Edom because they don't want that thing around. But then Obed-Edom's family is blessed by having the ark around. And so David says, we've got to bring it back to Jerusalem. So they go and get it. And this time things are going to be different. And we read about this in 1 Chronicles. Then David summoned Zadok and Abiathar the priest and Uriel, Asaiah, Joel, Shemaiah, Eliel, and Aminadab, the Levites. He said to them, you are the heads of the Levitical families. You and your fellow Levites are to consecrate yourselves and bring up the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, to the place I have prepared for it. It was because you, the Levites, did not bring it up the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of him about how to do it in the prescribed way. We did not inquire. David has been inquiring of the Lord over and over again, and now he's going to move the ark the first time, and he doesn't inquire. And Uzzah is struck dead. David has had this great relationship with God. And God was up here, and David was down here. But what's been happening is David's been sort of inching this direction. A little more, a little more, a little more. And somewhere in his mind, God has ceased to be holy. And Uzzah is struck dead, and David is reminded, God is not a firecracker. He is the King of the universe. What is it will remind us of that? Hopefully not someone being struck dead. But what is it that will remind us of that? I want to challenge you with something this week, and maybe you already practiced this. But I want to challenge you in your private time of prayer to do this. Now, some of you may already do this. But some of you may sit in a chair with a cup of coffee and pray. But to get on your knees and pray. Or maybe even do this. You know, people in the Bible do this all the time, especially when they become close to something like a burning bush or an angel appears to them. They bow down because they know in whose presence they are. The presence of the King. So I challenge you to do that. Maybe not at the restaurant. You probably don't want to go bow down in the middle of the aisle at the restaurant. And Bert, you get a pass. That new knee's probably not ready for that yet. But in your private prayer life at home, bow. Posture makes a difference. If it didn't, Moses would not have bowed down at the burning bush. So let me challenge you to do that this week. And if you're wrestling with that, as I've wrestled with that sometimes, asking myself, why would I do that? Then ask yourself, why am I wrestling with this? Why am I concerned? Why am I afraid here in my own bedroom to bow down before the King of Kings? I challenge you to try that this week and see if it doesn't change your perception about God. Let's stand and sing.